Our topic is new mobility. So maybe I start with asking you guys, what is new mobility for you?
Well, should I start?
Yeah, go ahead.
My name is Sørensen, and I'm actually using the new mobility. I've done that for 2 years. It basically means that I've sold my car. It has been a very emotional experience for me, but really I'm saving a lot of money, and I now enjoy freedom of mobility. So that is new mobility for me. And then we can fill in the blanks.
Yes, we continue. This is good beginning. Not having a car, it's very much part of the new mobility, the new generation, how they want to be mobile. And it is an individual, comfortable mobility, not owning a car. This is what I would like to put it on.
All right, on another perspective, I work for a city of Helsinki. And for cities, new mobility is a potential winner in a sense that it might solve the problems of congestion and air quality, emissions, all that.
Okay, so about selling a car, getting rid of a car, and actually new mobility is some sort of making or giving an alternative to owning a car. Sami, is it something you would agree on?
Yeah, the idea is, again, getting back to the city perspective, what we need in cities is that people actually get away from their own cars. They use public transport, they use something else, because that helps on the congestion and in the end, all the air quality issues, climate targets. So what we need to do is make it as easy as possible to use something else than your own car. And that's why
you mean your second car?
No, even your one and only car maybe.
Yeah.
That you don't have to own it. So you can live perfectly good life without having to own a car. So that's the target. And for that, we need to come up with new concepts, new services that make it as easy as possible for you. Public transport has been there, and in some cities, like for us, it's really good. But still, we need something more. Sometimes it's not the answer. And that's why we come up with a concept called mobility service. Like one interface, one subscription that then provides you access to everything.
Okay.
Even a car.
It sounds a bit like magic, right? Getting rid of a car and having a concept in place. What is, Hamid, what is that concept? Or Søren, whoever would like to respond to that question. What is that magic concept that should move us, the users, from being mobile with a car?
Because being mobile with a car is a pain in the neck if you live in a city. Because you can't really move anywhere. So many times it's much better for you to use alternative means, public transport, or even, as I do most of the time, use a bicycle. I'm from Copenhagen, which is, of course, a bicycle city. And then everybody else try to emulate and be my guest. But in reality, if I own my own car, I'm restricting my mobility to every time I move anywhere, it has to be in my car, because if I take the train, I'm paying, I think to myself, I'm paying twice. I have already paid for mobility, why should I pay again? If I do not own a car, I have total freedom of selecting whether this trip is best as a car trip or this trip is best as a train trip or even a bus. So by that, I have a lot of money in my pocket instead of putting it in some metal, and then I can use that for the services that I really need. So that's the miracle that is happening, and that is happening for me. But you have to try it before you believe it.
Okay. What can you actually, Hamid? You wanted to add something?
Yeah, I would like to just mention that a car in Stockholm. We have studied this in Stockholm. A car in Stockholm is, on average, used only 26 minutes per day, meaning it is about 96% of the time you own a car, it is parked somewhere. And parking places cost a lot of money. To have the car just parked somewhere will cost the owner a lot of money. And for those money, we could do something much better to make sure that we can provide or create alternatives to much better types of mobility without owning a car. And this is especially applies to young generation in our biggest cities in Sweden. Not only the car is very expensive to buy, the first problem if you buy a car is where to park it when I don't use it. And that space is so important nowadays due to urbanization, which is also similar to the most of the biggest cities in Europe. Urbanization is huge, it goes on everywhere. And that's a challenge to find a coexistence between number of cars and people who need those spaces.
Yeah. If I can add to that it's, yes, the focus is on cities, all the urbanization and that different elements there. But actually, at the same time, it means that there's even more challenges on the less dense areas. How can you live, again, perfectly good life there without having to own a car? And it's becoming more and more of a challenge. And then now that we are learning new ways of operating the mobility in cities, we need to also take the learnings when we get them. It's really early days now. But still, when we do have them, and how can we then apply them to less dense areas as well? So it's a combination of everything.
Okay, so how I understand what you're guys saying, the new mobility you're thinking of is, we call it mobility as a service, right?
Yeah.
Which is not about owning anything, but using different means of transportation in a wise, reasonable manner. How do we actually, how can we achieve it? I mean, like physically. We are at home or at work or wherever else. How can we access mobility according to our needs?
Well, I think we're already doing it today. The issue is just that we're doing it as we are buying everything else on the internet. You have to know that you can get a car. You have to know that you can get a scooter. You have to know a lot of apps and kind of know the infrastructure or the ecosystem the hard way. So it's a very difficult exercise. The mobility as a service, as an app, seen from a user point of view, actually helps you by integrating all that information and present you the total digital roadmap of what are your options for mobility. And that is really what mobility as a service does for you. It becomes your agent to help you navigate through the mobility network, if you will.
Yeah. Well, if I can add to that, it's about finding your options as easy as possible. That's one part of helping you to use something else. But then it becomes also for example, the payment models. You are in all transport. You are used to paying one trip at a time quite often. Yes, you may have monthly passes for public transport in cities, but that's about it. Now the idea is that yes, you can still pay trip by trip. At the same time, there will be more and different new kinds of pricing models as well, which could be some kind of monthly packages. It could be something else that we haven't seen yet. Hopefully there will be some new models as well. But it also means that you don't have to think your mobility per trip basis. It's just to think of it as a monthly basis. You need to, whenever you need to go somewhere, you just go. It's all covered in a monthly fee. That you as a user need to have a bit new kind of mindset as well.
So you're saying that this device and the app inside is just my path to mobility, wherever I need and whatever I need.
Yeah,
right?
Actually, it wouldn't even have to be an app. It's basically to show you your options. It could be some kind of smartwatch. Basically, you need to ID yourself when you go and use that particular mode of transport.
This is, if I may, this is very interesting. Things are getting much more smarter than ever before through sharing data, knowing things about each other. what they do, how people move, and this kind of stuff. Can you imagine a system where you don't need to chase a bus? The bus will chase you to pick you up. Not only bus, but many other options, and many other services that knows what is best for you at this particular moment. Being that smart is very good services, I believe.
Okay, so just maybe an explanation to the audience. Mobility as a service has many functionalities, but basically it is planning your route from point A to point B by giving you advice what means of transportation to use. By the same solution, you can access these means. I mean, you have a bus ticket, you have access to car sharing or to bike sharing or to a taxi. You have a single payment for that, which means not even, as Søren mentioned, not pay as you go, but you can have a subscription as you have, I don't know, a subscription for music, for anything else.
We used a lot of analogy from telecom.
You can subscribe mobility, you can make exceptional savings on car ownership, which you actually don't need to own any longer, if I understand. Mm-hmm. That sounds exceptional for me. Do you know any examples of such systems or solutions already being implemented somewhere?
Well, should I start?
Go ahead.
Yeah, there was a really nice pilot in Gothenburg in Sweden a few years back, but that was 1 year only focusing on families, helping them to get rid of their second car. There's something in Vienna, for example, they've done, it's kind of semi-public private operation. They're like providing you access via one customer ship to many transport modes. And then, of course, there's Helsinki. We do have the first and so far only commercial version of it, as we, in a sense that how we envisioned MAS in the first place. MAS short for mobility service. So, and that's a private company who provides you this access, and then they have business-to-business cooperation and agreements with both public and private sector transport.
Okay, so
I think the biggest issue, one of the big issues here is who is going to be the mobility as a service agent? Who is going to be my agent in the market to figure out, to present me all the options? Is that going to be public transit that just evolves into that? Is that going to be a city? Or is it best that it's the private enterprise that takes care of that offering, both for private and public services?
And who would you see as your private agent for?
I would see it as it has to be. I would see it as the best one is a private enterprise or private enterprises because they are more apt to work in the market and adapt to new situations. And you can see a similar approach in the airline travel market. I mean, we all know that you can buy tickets from airlines, but many of us buy them through Momondo, through TripAdvisor, through all kinds of digital platforms that actually does the same for us, present all the options and giving me the cheapest ticket for my need and the best schedule, because I need to have that information presented to me so I can make the choice. I don't want to rely on that I only can go using SAS from Copenhagen. I mean, when Norwegian has a better flight and price. So this is what the airline industry has given me, and I can tell you that, and you know it all, there's a lot of competition in that market, despite the fact that they have put a layer between us and the airline, namely the travel agents that are competing in the market to presenting the best solution. But it's the same basic offerings that they provide. It's basically the same thing that we're trying to do with mobility as a service, or the vision of mobility as a service. The travel agent for ground transport.
Okay, Hamid, what? Go ahead.
Yes,
you want to follow
I
up?
just want to give you some examples. This was the question. We have 3 major projects that are running in Sweden. And this success factor that we have identified at the moment is that when the needs of the people are defined in a way, then it's very possible to apply mobility as a service in places like in Scania Go. This is one example. We have this about 12,000 employees which who need to be mobile within Scania, which is very big area. They are moving around, and it works. It works actually when people feel that they don't need to be dependent on their cars, and it is, of course, it is for free. They are doing that. The employer is doing that for them. And another one which is also has started actually in Gothenburg. It is within Lindholmen Science Park. It is also a very big area. I think that when we talk about actors, somebody has to do that, like Momondo or some other. I think also it can start from a smaller scale and a scale-up solutions to bigger places. This is what I believe it would affect people. And during that time, we'll give opportunity to people to start accepting the system. This is also very important.
Sami?
Yeah, you mentioned Scania Go. It is a good example of a service that's targeted to a certain customer segment, in this case employer and their employees. But then it comes down to the business models of mobility service. They could do it and organize it and operate it by themselves. As they are a big company, they could probably do it. Or they could buy it from someone, outsource it, and then somebody whose main focus is on organizing these things, and then they would provide it as a service to Scania, who then provides it as a service to employees, of course. But that's just normal business. And then, of course, the consumer market, it's different. The big different rules apply there, and we need to think of the business models in a sense that who do we want to sell tickets. It's not about, with MAS, we are not talking about who's organizing transport, operating transport, who's looking after transport planning in the city or a region. Since it's providing access, it means that somebody is reselling transport service. And then you end up with the question that should this be something for public sector, or should somebody have a monopoly on just selling tickets? And that's why we are really keen on pushing that separate the physical transport layer from another layer that provides basically reselling of those services. The two different functions.
Okay, I see we are stepping also or touching the topic of cooperation between public and private sectors, which I think is actually key to see things as mobility as a service happening. Yep. Sami and Hamid, you are representing public administration, or like the city, the municipality. Mm-hmm. How would you define, or how can like the city administration and the public transport authorities contribute to systems such as mobility as a service, or what is actually the role you see for public administration in that process?
Yeah. Well, we get our share of attention becoming kind of the birthplace for the whole phenomenon. So there's a lot of cities that come to talk to us and ask these same questions. And I always tell them that I wouldn't tell you what to do. I'll tell you there's a lot of homework you need to do, and I can help you start doing that. But then it's up to you. You need to decide a lot of things before you go there. So there's not one way of doing it. There's cities that are quite happy that it's an extension to public transport. So with smart card, you can get also access to car sharing or something else, even private transport. But then there's some challenges in that it doesn't scale up, and it doesn't provide you all the value-add services that already commercial sector can do, like the monthly fee, use as much as you can. We kind of service level guarantee that we get you there to your destination. That public sector can't cope with that. If it's public sector driven, yes, go and do it. Then it's public service, and there's process to do that. But if it's private sector, there's a number of ways how you can do that, and it's all about enabling, just allowing it to happen, and then things you can do to support. And first and most critical thing is to make sure that the third parties who aim to resell those services to become a mass operator, they have access to reselling those transport services, meaning that transport providers need to open their interfaces and allow third parties to resell the tickets. And we did that by legislation. We have a new legislation that says that yes, this is what you have to do.
Okay.
And if you have open interfaces, something will start happening. I guarantee that.
So that's recommendation number one.
Yes.
For us here in Poland.
Yes, and then
open
there are a
the
few hundred
interface.
other ones. Let's not go there.
Okay, Hamid, from your perspective, Stockholm?
I think that it is very important, as Sami is pointing out here, one fundamental basis for things start flying is that we actually have a platform for exchange of data and communication between various actors. And this is something that public authority could actually enable it by to build up something, allowing different solutions in combination with processes and routines for secure data exchange. That would be a very first step and crucial step to take to make sure that people can get the information they need.
I could add another critical thing: the new mindset. Not just the users that need to have a new mindset how they buy and use transport.
Exactly.
It's also the enabling stakeholders, both in public and private sector. It changes the game quite a lot, and that means there needs to be a new mindset, especially in public sector and public transport. That their whole world that they run for decades is going to change, and they must allow it, and that sometimes may be a little tough thing to do.
Okay. So that's the voice of the public sector. Søren, you are a private sector person and an advisor.
Yeah.
Like taking a practical approach. Let's imagine Katowice or any other of the Polish cities. We do have public administration. We do have private transportation providers. What would be your advice to those parties to start, or how could these actors start working out something like mobility as a service? What should their first steps be?
I think one of the first steps is to try to realize whether mobility as a service will actually generate more business. Because if it does that, if you come to that conclusion, then the rest is easy. Then it's just execution. Because if we now could take 5% of the private, we have 20% public transit, 80% private cars mobility around, typically in the Western world. So if we just could grab maybe 5% of private car ownership and move that into shared car ownership, then we would actually increase the total business for shared mobility with 25%. So that would be a lot of new business for all the actors, because if I'm using a car share scheme, it also means that I'll be using public transport more. So public transport should actually encourage private car sharing scheme, because the side effect is huge. You'll generate much more traffic to the public transit. So the actors have to kind of figure out this. It is a good idea to open up the data, and it's also a good idea to invite new players into the sales channel. That is a mobility as a service agent that actually can go out and grab up that new market and be the motivator for people to actually give up car ownership.
Okay, that sounds really great. We only have a few, not too much time left. Apparently, there are no questions from the audience through Slido, but maybe there are some questions just to be asked straight away from your seats regarding mobility as a service. If not,
we are blocking them to getting out to the bar.
I think we have to still work. There is still today, there is still tomorrow, and the following days on what changing the mindset.
Yeah.
For me, I think this is like. Oh, there is a question.
Yeah, it's got a question. There is this matter that.
Hold on.
Some countries and some cities are eventually trying to get to this point where the main urban areas, the centers of the cities are like zero emission, EVs only, or even just public transport. How soon do you think this will happen, and how soon will people accept the idea that here in the city center where we do most business, we don't use cars or we only use EVs?
I think this is, because we have, the time is up right now, and this is a question more related to low emission zones. Let's chat on that afterwards. Feel free to discuss it also with ourselves. And for the moment, I would like to thank you, Sami, Sahala, Hamid, Zarghampour, and Sørensen, a Scandinavian trio on mobility as a service. It was a real pleasure. So thank you very much.
Thank you.